The island was first sighted by a wayward British merchant vessel in 1675 and was later claimed for the British Crown by Captain James Cook in 1775. Inspired by Cook's reports, hunters arrived in droves to harvest fur seals and later whales, both of which they managed to hunt to the brink of extinction in just a matter of years. The rusting remains of whaling stations such as Stromness and Grytviken reminding of those darker days. Numerous intrepid adventurers and explorers have traversed its shores since then, including the famous Antarctic explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton, whose arrival at Stromness after the loss of his ship the Endurance is the stuff of legend. Such a kinship did he feel with the island that he requested to be buried here, his grave now pride of place just beyond the ruins of Grytviken. In summer, 75% of the island is covered by snowfields and glaciers, while in winter the snow blanket carpets the whole island and reaches right down to the sea. There are no permanent human inhabitants, but the island is teeming with life. Protected since the 1960s, the fur seals have made a tremendous recovery, reclaiming their favorite breeding beaches and making the seas boil with their twisting bodies. Reindeer gallop across the hillsides, descendants of those brought to South Georgia to provide the hunters some sport in their spare time, and something else on their menu apart from penguin meat. Sluggish elephant seals haul out here, their wide-eyed pups dozing on soft dandelion beds. And 30 different species of seabird come to South Georgia to breed, with twice as many visiting. Indeed, two of the world's most impressive wildlife spectacles can be found here. On the outlying islands, such as Pryan Island, the magnificent wandering albatross return throughout their lives to re-establish lifelong partnerships. Renovate their nests, and engage in elaborate courtship dances. And in the valleys of St. Andrews Bay and Salisbury Plain, hundreds of thousands of king penguins carpet the landscape. As far as the eye can see. Although humanity has certainly altered South Georgia, there remains a pristine quality to this island that makes it easy to imagine a world untouched by human hand, a vision of pure wilderness. Surrounded by wild seas, cloaked by freezing temperatures, and totally isolated at the bottom of our planet, Antarctica appears to be an unlikely tourist destination. And yet, tourists are drawn here from all over the world, with their numbers increasing every season. The tourist season is in the austral summer, from November to March, and at present some 20,000 tourists visit Antarctica each year. This does not sound like a large number considering the vastness of the continent, but the ships all tend to frequent the same sites, with some sites exposed to human presence day in and day out. Ships that allow disembarkation carry between 100 and 400 guests. According to guidelines, no more than 100 guests can go ashore at any one time. But although the smaller ships will remain in an area for only a few hours, a ship with more passengers may have to spend up to 12 hours shuttling tourists ashore, exposing the animals to humans for extended periods of time. Summer is the breeding season for most Antarctic animals, and penguins in particular are very vulnerable to the effects of human interference. If startled, they may flee their nests, allowing their eggs to cool or their young to be predated upon. Seals with distinct harems and territories can be displaced by beach landings. Tourists can also damage the rare and fragile plant life of Antarctica, such as moss, lichen, and algae. The moss here grows incredibly slowly, some species taking 10 years to reach the size of a nickel. One human footstep can destroy a moss bed that may be hundreds of years old. And the more ships that visit Antarctica, the greater the risk of a serious shipwreck or oil spill that could spell disaster for entire ecosystems. In response to these concerns and others, guidelines and operating procedures have been put into place to minimize human impact. The Antarctic Treaty was formed in 1961 and comprises 45 countries. Under this treaty, all participating countries have set aside dispute over territorial sovereignty, and all tour operators are required to conduct environmental impact assessments and follow strict guidelines relating to proper waste management and oil spill cleanup procedures. Most of these tour operators are part of the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators, IATO, a voluntary organization whose members comply with the protocols put in place by the Antarctic Treaty. IATO helped form the guidance for visitors to Antarctica, which includes stipulations about maximum guest numbers ashore and distances from wildlife, with the tour operators working together to coordinate pattern and frequencies of visits to breeding colonies. Thanks to this cooperative effort, scientific studies have indicated that the impact of tourism has been minimal, and tourists play an essential role in the conservation of Antarctica, leaving the continent as ambassadors to educate others about this unique place. But it's a double-edged sword. As the love of Antarctica grows, larger and more numerous vessels are expected to head south. The pressure on wildlife will increase, as will the probability of environmental disasters. Many IATO operators and conservationists are calling for the guidelines to shift from voluntary to legally binding, and are working cooperatively to ensure that the guidelines remain current and continue to improve. Whether a positive long-term balance between tourism and conservation can be maintained remains to be seen. For now, those privileged enough to visit this continent must stay mindful to the motto: leave behind only footsteps and take away only memories. From the earliest days of exploration, Antarctica was plundered for its natural resources. And the chief resource was whales. In the austral summer, many different whale species converge in the Antarctic waters to dine on the vast swarms of krill. And hot on their heels came the hunters. Antarctic whaling began on a large scale in 1904 with the building of a processing station at Grytviken, South Georgia Island. Until its closure in the early 1960s, Grytviken processed hundreds of thousands of humpback, fin, blue, and sei whales. Its tranquil harbor was stained red for months on end as the mighty mammals were carved up for their flesh and blubber. with acrid smoke pouring from the many cookeries lining the shore. When the station was closed, the site was simply abandoned, leaving behind an eerie landscape of rusting wreckage and disintegrating ships. Now, a small church rises from the ashes. And a museum full of whaling paraphernalia reminds visitors of darker days. Deep in the flooded caldera of Whalers Bay, on Deception Island, another processing station was also active at this time. Sulfuric steam from underground volcanic springs oozes through the sand here like poltergeists of the departed hunters. Here, too, hundreds of thousands of whales were rendered into oil, with the massive boilers still dominating the landscape. Beyond are the crumbling huts in which the men lived. And on a nearby hill, a handful of burial crosses still stand as a lasting testimony to the harshness of their lives. Rising up from the black volcanic sands are numerous skeletons from those days. Piles and piles of wooden barrels, old water boats, and even the bones of the great leviathans themselves. Accelerating the carnage was the introduction of factory ships in 1925, whereby whales could be processed entirely at sea. The blubber was stripped, and the remains left to float away, washing up on many of the Antarctic beaches, with many beaches to this day still carpeted with bones. Thankfully, international laws were finally passed in the late 60s and early 70s banning the hunting of whales. But despite decades of protection, most whale species have still only partially recovered and represent a small fraction of their pre-whaling populations. Most remain vulnerable. Despite this, many whaling nations are pressing for a lift on the ban of commercial whaling. It seems the fate of these majestic creatures still rests in our hands.